The forest never forgets who disturbs it. There are places where the air does not move, where the ground feels too soft under your feet, and where silence does not mean peace. It means something is listening. Some call them wilderness zones, but those who made it back call them traps. They speak about sounds that followed them through the trees, of laughter where there should have been none, and of voices that knew their names before they even spoke. These are their true accounts, from people who swore they would never step near the woods again. Each of them walked into what they thought was nature, and met something that did not belong to this world. Before you keep watching, make sure you have subscribed. Those who leave midway have reported hearing whispers from the woods at night. Comment where you are watching from, and what time it is. It helps us know who is still awake when the forest listens. Now listen closely. The woods remember. I was 21 when it happened. It was early autumn, the kind of season where the Oregon woods seem alive. Not peaceful, but restless. I was a forestry student back then, and our field class had gone deep into the National Reserve to study old-growth trees. We were 6 in total, plus our instructor, Mr. Langford. The first 2 days were fine. We hiked, collected samples, made notes about soil quality. But on the third night, a storm rolled in sooner than expected. Our guide said we could not hike back down the ridge safely, so we had to camp near an old ranger cabin, something built decades ago and long abandoned. It looked half swallowed by the forest, tilted slightly like it was sinking into the earth. The roof had holes, but the inside was dry enough. We set up sleeping bags and lit a small fire inside the stove. Everyone was tired, quiet. Outside, the rain hit the trees hard, and wind moved through them in a strange rhythm, almost like breathing. That was when we first heard the whistle. It came from far out in the trees, 3 slow notes. Rising, falling, rising again. It wasn't the wind. Everyone froze for a second. Then Langford said it was probably another hiker or someone signaling their group. We wanted to believe him, but the sound came again, closer this time, as if whoever it was had moved nearer in the span of a few seconds. We went to the window, but all we could see were the tree trunks and darkness between them. No flashlight, no shadow, just rain. No one spoke much after that. We locked the door with a wooden plank and tried to sleep. I woke up sometime after midnight. The fire had burned down. The cabin was dark except for a weak orange glow from the stove. Everyone was asleep except me. I could hear something faint through the rain, soft, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. They were slow, uneven, sometimes stopping entirely. Then came the whistle again. Not far away this time. It sounded like it was right outside the wall near my head. 3 notes. Pause. 3 more. It felt too precise to be random. I sat up slowly and looked at the others. Langford was awake too, staring at the ceiling. Neither of us said a word. We just listened. The footsteps stopped. The forest went silent. No rain, no wind. Just stillness so heavy it pressed on my chest. After maybe a minute, something tapped on the window. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a single tap-tap, like someone testing if we were awake. I didn't move. I remember how my skin felt, cold, prickling all over, like my body was warning me to stay still. Langford whispered, "Nobody move." We didn't. Another tap, then another. Then the whistle again, now coming from the opposite side of the cabin. It was circling us. Langford reached for his flashlight, but before he could switch it on, something brushed across the wooden wall outside. It sounded like a hand dragging slowly along the boards, nails grazing the wood. The sound moved along the entire wall, across the window, then stopped near the door. That was when the whistling changed. It was no longer the same 3 notes. It had shifted, lower, slower, but somehow trying to match the sound of our breathing. I realized it was mimicking us. Someone whispered, "Make it stop." Langford shouted out, "Who's there?" The forest answered with the same words, repeated softly, like someone whispering them back from the trees. "Who's there?" I felt something break in my head at that moment, a snap between what I knew was real and what I was hearing. We stayed awake until morning. When sunlight finally came through the gaps in the roof, the woods were quiet again. No footprints in the mud, no sign of anyone. Langford insisted it was the storm playing tricks on our hearing, but no one bought that. When we packed up, we found something carved into the doorframe. 6 small lines, 1 for each of us. The cuts were fresh. We hiked out that day, faster than we should have, barely stopping to rest. That night, back at the base camp, we tried to talk about it. Every time someone brought up the whistle, we would fall silent. None of us wanted to remember the sound. But it did not end there. 2 weeks later, one of the students, Naomi, started hearing the whistle again. She lived alone in an apartment near campus. She said it started faint, outside her window at night. The same pattern, 3 notes, rising, falling, rising. She called Langford one evening, crying, saying it wouldn't stop, that it sounded closer every time she turned off her lights. The next morning, she was gone. The police found her car parked by the edge of the same forest where we had camped. Her door was open, keys still in the ignition. They searched for 3 days, but never found her. Langford left the university soon after. The rest of us stopped talking completely. I moved out of Oregon a year later, but the sound followed me. I've heard it twice since then, once outside a motel in Idaho, and once near my apartment window on a rainy night. It always comes the same way. 3 notes. Slow, patient, like it's waiting for me to answer. I have not been back to the woods since. I do not step near tree lines, and I keep my windows closed even in summer. Sometimes I hear the wind move through the trees and think of that cabin sinking deeper into the soil, forgotten. A few months ago, I searched online for old records of the area. The cabin had been built in the 1930s by a ranger named Elias Crow. According to the archive, he was known for using a whistle to call his team during patrols. He went missing in 1948 during a storm, and his body was never recovered. Locals used to say his whistle could still be heard when someone got lost out there. A signal, they said, meant to guide travelers back. But every search party that followed the sound never returned. Now sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear it, that long, careful breath through unseen lips. 3 notes, rising, falling, rising, and I know it is not the forest calling me back. It is the cabin and whatever still waits inside it. It has been nearly 8 years since that night, and even now, I still check maps of that mountain, trying to make sense of what we saw. I tell myself I must have misremembered the trail, that exhaustion made me see things. But there is one truth I cannot shake. That camp was real when we walked into it, and gone when we woke up. Back then, I was 27. My girlfriend, Claire, and I had planned a weekend hike through the Wasatch Range in Utah. We were both outdoor types, careful, experienced, used to spending nights under the open sky. It was early September, just before the tourist season dropped off. The ranger had warned us about unstable weather, but the forecast said clear skies. The first day went smoothly. The trail was quiet, the air thin and clean. We followed switchbacks through pines and aspens, stopping to take photos whenever the valley opened beneath us. By sunset, we had reached the high trail, a narrow ridge lined with dry grass and scattered rocks. We were supposed to set up camp near a small lake 2 miles ahead, but by the time we reached the next marker, darkness had already fallen. Our flashlights cut through a pale fog that seemed to rise from nowhere. We should have turned back. Instead, we kept walking, following what we thought was the path. That was when we saw the light. It flickered softly between the trees, yellow and steady, like the glow of a lantern. Claire squeezed my arm, relieved. "There's another group camping out here," she said. The idea of finding people after hours of silence felt like rescue. We left the trail and followed the light. It led us into a clearing surrounded by tall firs. There, just as we hoped, stood a small campsite, 4 tents, a fire pit, and 6 people sitting around it. They looked normal at first glance, bundled in jackets, their faces orange from the firelight. One of them waved. "Evening," he said. His voice was calm, low, almost too calm. We stepped into the clearing, apologizing for intruding. "We lost the trail," I said. "Mind if we rest for a bit?" The man nodded. "Plenty of room," he said. But no one else spoke. They just stared at the fire, quiet, unmoving. We dropped our packs near the edge and sat down. The warmth felt good after the cold hike. Claire tried to make small talk, asked where they were from, how long they'd been camping, but her words hung in the air without response. The group just sat there, heads slightly tilted toward the fire, eyes reflecting the flames but never blinking. After a few minutes, I noticed something off about the fire itself. It wasn't burning wood. The flames rose from a black mound that looked like wet soil. Yet it gave off heat and a smell I couldn't place, something metallic, like blood and rust. I remember whispering to Claire, "Let's just rest and leave early." She nodded. We ate quietly from our packs, trying to ignore the silence. The only sound came from the faint crackle of that strange fire and the whisper of wind moving through the branches. At some point, fatigue got the better of me. I remember lying down beside Claire, closing my eyes, and hearing the faint hum of voices. They weren't talking, They were murmuring in rhythm, like distant chanting. When I woke, everything was cold. The fire was gone, replaced by a ring of black ash. The air was heavy, wet, and smelled of burnt hair. Claire was already sitting up, staring straight ahead. "Where are they?" she asked. The camp was empty. No tents, no backpacks, no footprints, just flattened patches of grass where the tents had been. The clearing looked older, as if no one had set foot there in years. Even the fog had lifted. I checked my watch. It was 6:30 in the morning. We had slept barely 2 hours. Claire wanted to leave immediately. We grabbed our packs and looked for the trail, but the way we came in was gone. No path, no broken branches, nothing but trees pressing close on all sides. We tried to orient ourselves using the sun, walking in what we believed was the right direction. But the forest kept repeating. The same fallen tree, the same rocks, the same faint ring of ash. Every turn brought us back to that clearing. At noon, we stopped to catch our breath. Claire was trembling. "This is wrong," she said. "We're walking in circles." That was when we heard the laughter. It came from behind us, light at first, like someone exhaling through a smile. Then it grew louder. I turned around, and the clearing was different again. The fire was back. The tents stood where they had before, every color identical, every shape exact. But the people, they were frozen, completely still. Faces turned toward us, mouths half open, eyes dull and gray like stones. The smoke rose upward, but it did not move in the wind. Claire grabbed my hand, whispering, "Do not look at them." We ran, I don't know how long or where, but eventually we stumbled into a rocky slope and saw the main trail below us. By the time we reached the ranger station, it was evening. A search team went back with us 2 days later, but there was nothing, no clearing, no ashes, not even a flat patch of ground where one could have been. The ranger, an older man with sunburned skin, listened quietly. Then he said something I still think about. "You're not the first to see it," he said. "That camp's been reported every few years. Folks see the fire, walk toward it, and vanish. The trail doesn't even go that far anymore. It's been closed since the 90s. He showed us an old newspaper clipping. In 1993, 6 campers had died in a fire caused by lightning. Their remains were found in that area, burned beyond recognition. The cause of death was listed as suffocation from smoke, not the fire itself. I tried to tell myself that maybe what we saw was a mirage, a projection, some trick of light. But 3 months later, Claire began having nightmares. She said she could still smell the metallic smoke. Sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night and ask me if I heard them. One morning, I woke up to find her gone. Her car was still in the driveway. Her shoes were by the door. The police searched for weeks but found no trace. The only thing they discovered was her compass, lying near the edge of that same mountain trail. I stopped hiking after that. I moved states, took an office job, tried to live like none of it had ever happened. But every year around September, I dream of the firelight, steady, yellow, and patient, waiting between the trees. I can almost hear that calm voice again, the one that said plenty of room. And sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, the air in my room smells faintly of rust and smoke. Maybe that camp never left. Maybe it's still out there, waiting for the next pair of lights to wander off the trail and join them. It has been almost 6 years since that trip through the Appalachian Trail, but I still hear it sometimes, the step that lands one heartbeat after mine. People tell me I must have imagined it, that isolation plays tricks on your mind, but I know what I heard. I also know what followed me out of those woods. I had taken that trail dozens of times before. I was a quiet person, more comfortable with the sound of wind in the trees than with conversation. That autumn, I wanted space. My brother had just passed away, and I needed to clear my head. So I packed light, left my phone in the truck, and promised myself 2 days of silence in the mountains of East Tennessee. The morning I set out was calm. The leaves were turning, bright red and brown, scattered across the path like old letters. The air was cool enough to sting my lungs, and each breath felt heavier the deeper I went. I made good time that first day, passing a few hikers who nodded politely before vanishing around bends. By late afternoon, I reached a small clearing beside a creek, the kind of place where the water barely moves, only murmurs. I set up my tent, lit a small fire, and ate a simple dinner. Everything was quiet except for the gentle rhythm of the stream. That's the last moment I remember feeling at peace. Around midnight, I woke up. The fire was out. The night had gone completely still. Not even the insects were making noise. It was so silent that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Then from somewhere behind my tent, I heard a single step, deliberate, heavy, close. I held my breath. Another step came a little closer. I told myself it had to be a deer or maybe the wind shifting a branch, but when I sat up, the sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. Finally, I unzipped the tent and shone my flashlight toward the trees. The beam caught only fog and empty air. I stood there for maybe a minute, heart pounding, before retreating inside. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I found something strange near the creek, footprints. They weren't mine. They were spaced too far apart, like whoever made them had been walking slowly in a circle around my camp. Still, I tried to stay calm. I packed my gear early and decided to move on. The next trail marker was 6 miles north. That was when I first noticed it, a faint crunch of leaves behind me, always a second after my own steps. I stopped. The sound stopped. I walked again. It followed. Every time I paused, silence returned instantly. It wasn't random, it wasn't wind, it was in rhythm with me. I turned around more than once, scanning the trees, but there was nothing. The forest looked ordinary, except it didn't feel ordinary anymore. It felt close, tight, like the space between the trees had shrunk overnight. By the 3rd hour, I was losing track of distance. The map didn't match the turns I remembered. I tried marking a tree with my knife to track my direction. An hour later, I passed the same tree again, my own mark already faded as if carved years ago. The footsteps continued. I started talking out loud to steady myself. "It's just an echo," I said, though I knew echoes don't walk in sync. When the sun began to drop, I felt the forest itself dim. The air thickened, colder. The steps behind me grew slower, heavier. At one point, I stopped entirely, determined to catch whoever or whatever was following. I turned around and waited. For a few seconds, there was only quiet. Then, from about 20 feet away, I saw movement. Someone was standing between the trees. I thought it was a hiker. I raised my hand and shouted, "Hey, are you lost?" No answer. The figure didn't move. I took one step toward it, and it took one step toward me. That was when I realized it was me. Same height, same backpack, same jacket. But the face, it wasn't a face. It was pale, like paper stretched over nothing. I backed away. It mirrored me again, one step behind, perfectly timed. I turned and ran. The sound behind me matched every move, every crunch, every stumble. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until I reached a sharp bend and saw the ranger's outpost through the trees. The wooden porch light was glowing. When I stumbled out of the forest, a ranger was standing outside smoking. I must have looked insane, covered in mud, gasping for air. I tried to tell him someone was following me, but when he went to check, he found no one. Not a single footprint but mine. I slept inside the outpost that night. The ranger kept the light on, telling me stories about people who get lost on the trail and see themselves walking back. I thought he was joking until he said something that made my blood run cold. Every time someone says they hear footsteps, they're always one step behind, never ahead. It's like the mountain's shadow keeping pace. The next morning, he drove me back to my truck. I thanked him, but I didn't tell him the worst part. When I woke up that morning, there was dirt on the floor near my bed, and one clear print of a boot identical to mine pointed toward me. I left Tennessee that week and never hiked again. But it didn't end there. Months later, while unpacking boxes in my new apartment, I found something that didn't belong to me. A folded map of the Appalachian Trail, mud-stained and torn. My handwriting was on it, marking the same route I'd taken. But there was a note scrawled in the margin that I never wrote. It said, "Do not stop walking. It's still behind you." I keep that map locked away now. Sometimes when I walk down quiet hallways or empty parking lots, I hear it again. That single step, perfectly in time, but always a fraction late. People think it's paranoia, a trauma response. But I know the sound. It doesn't echo, it follows. And I know that if I ever stop listening for it, one day it might stop walking behind me and start walking beside me. Some who step into the forest never truly leave it. You can leave the trail, wash the mud from your hands, even forget the path that brought you there. But the forest does not forget you. It keeps a sound, a breath, a trace of every heartbeat that dared to echo beneath its canopy. The ones who vanished in these stories may be gone, but their steps are still out there, circling the same trees, whispering through the same wind. If you ever find yourself alone among the trees and the silence suddenly grows too heavy, do not turn around. Keep walking, because the forest has a way of remembering faces, and sometimes it follows them home. Which of tonight's encounters disturbed you the most? Tell us below. Your story might be closer to theirs than you think. And before night falls, make sure you have subscribed. The next time you hear a knock at your window or a step behind you, it might be because the forest is awake again.